Hello, everyone. This is Nayiri from Low Carbon Fasting. My guest today is a fellow podcast host. She'll tell you more about it, and the link will be below. She's an advocate of, now hear this, she's an advocate of NSNG, no sugar, no grain diet, as promoted. I think first it was promoted by Vinnie Tortorich. And she's an advocate of that diet, obviously, particularly for mental health disorders. She's recovered from a number of mental health conditions using the ketogenic diet or the NSNG diet as an intervention. And I'm very excited to say she's currently completing her, I don't know if it's right, but she's completing her accreditation program with the SMHP, where my accreditation comes from. So I'm very excited to introduce you all to Robyn Dobbins. Robyn, welcome.
Hi, Nayiri. It's so good to be here. Thank you so much for asking me to join you.
Robyn Dobbins. I love the rhyme in that. I love the rhyme in your name.
Yeah, but it's really very funny. When I first got engaged to my husband, it was around Thanksgiving, and we were at my grandparents' house, and my grandmother, she was all excited. And she was setting the table, and so she's setting the table, and she just all of a sudden she just busts out laughing, and I'm like, "Grandma, why are you laughing?" And she's like, I just realized your name's going to be Robyn Dobbins. So it's been silly. And then even my husband was like, when we were engaged still, he's like, you don't have to take my name if that's going to bother you, but it's been catchy. So, now if I'm at a conference and I say, hi, I'm Robyn Dobbins, people usually are familiar with the name.
It's incredible. It's incredible. And you're very unique. I think you're probably the only Robyn Dobbins.
Yeah, perhaps. I've never looked.
There can't be too many others. Robyn, where do we start from? Okay, so let's start from the very beginnings, when you first noticed signs of depression, and then I'm only presuming bipolar came later. So can you take us back to were you a child when you first sort of noticed that you might be clinically depressed?
I was in high school when I first started noticing, I had suicidal thoughts, and I just didn't want to be around anymore. But I was very, very quiet about it. My sister knew, but I didn't have very many friends, so she kind of took me under her wing. She's older than me, so she kind of took me under her wing and kind of protected me. But otherwise, I was very, very quiet about what I was feeling, what I was going through. It was a lot of, I just felt worthless. I would compare myself to other people and wonder why they were doing so well, and I was trying to do the exact same things and couldn't be successful with them. So that went on for years. But my first official diagnosis was after my son was born in 2005. And my husband started noticing my symptoms. I was leaving little notes all over the house that were like, I don't want to be here anymore. I don't want to do this anymore. And he had found them and confronted me about it. We got into an argument, and I was so just emotional that I actually couldn't speak. So he would say something to me, and I was just writing it down, and we were going back and forth in that manner. And he finally asked me, do you want to hurt yourself? And I was like, yeah. So he rushed me off to the hospital, where I was then diagnosed with postpartum depression.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where my first actual diagnosis. So, but I mean, it's not like that was gone through that time. I went through high school, I went through college, and was just hiding how I felt from everyone.
So when you were officially diagnosed, were you put on medication for postpartum depression?
Yes. So that was just like, I wasn't admitted to the hospital at that time. I was just given my bottle of antidepressants and sent on my way, and I just religiously took those medications because I figured that was the only thing that was ever going to help me. So that's what I did until I was pregnant again with my daughter. And I was like, well, I don't know how this is going to affect the unborn baby, so maybe I should get off of this med. So that I had asked the doctor if I should do that, and they said, yeah, that might be a good idea. But then I ended up just being, I mean, just awful. I just was not well, and I had asked to get put back on them. So before she was born, I was already back on my antidepressants.
At best, what do you think they did for you? Put you to sleep, I guess?
At that time, I was a pretty functional. I mean, I had to be. It didn't matter how I felt. I had to be functional. I had, uh, after she was born, I had two babies, both, you know, they're 3 years, not even 3 years apart. So I have two little babies. My husband travels for work, so he would leave on a Sunday night and not return until Saturday morning. So it wasn't like I could just curl up in a ball and hide. I had responsibilities to do, but I was just very exhausted all of the time. Obviously, having babies is not easy work, but um, uh, fighting how you feel all the time and still trying to accomplish all your responsibilities is just very, very exhausting.
So when did the bipolar come into this picture?
So later on, we moved from where we were living, and for whatever reason, I didn't tell the new doctors that I had that I was on that medication, and I just slowly was not on it anymore. And so things were, I mean, I probably didn't have medication. I don't remember really how long. See, she was born in 2017, and I think my diagnosis was in two.
2007.
She was born in 2007, and I think my diagnosis was in 2013. So that's quite some time where I wasn't on any medications, and I was trying to do things, but um, I just started noticing that, first of all, I was just like angry all the time. I wanted to have order and I couldn't have order. This Everything is just in disarray, and it was just making me angry all of the time. My son would wake up for school, and I'd literally scream at him from the moment he got out of bed all the way until I dropped him off at school, and then still have to go home and like care for the daughter that's not in school. And she was in the car for the whole thing. Even though she's younger, she was in the car for the whole thing. So, and my kids were scared to be around me. My husband and I would argue all the time. Everything was just unpleasant all the time. So I started reading books, memoirs from other people who had bipolar disorder, and I was like, a lot of this is resonating with me. Like, I think maybe this is what's going on, because I always had like this strong desire to just like go. I just needed to get in the car and go. Or the only thing that's going to make me feel better is to just go shopping or something. But I was always fighting the fact that my husband travels for work, so I have to stay at the house. I have responsibilities. So I was constantly fighting that, like, I have to be responsible. I have to put that number one, even though that's the furthest thing from what I want to do. So once I started reading those memoirs, I was like, gosh, a lot of this sounds like what goes on in my own head or what I'm doing. So I just went to my general practitioner, and I said, this is what I think is going on. And he asked me some questions, and he goes back in his office, and he comes back and he's like, yeah, I think you might be bipolar. He gives me medications and then sets me up with psychiatric care after that. So it was a long time. That's probably what was going on all along, but it took a long time to kind of figure out what was happening.
So let's go back to the basics. So for most of my viewers will be familiar with depression, or even a sort of clinical depression.
Mm-hmm.
Not everyone is familiar with bipolar. Could you give us a brief sort of definition or description of what it is and what it feels like? What are the characteristics of bipolar disorder? I guess it is,
So
right?
yes,
Yeah.
yes. So for me, and you know, in a lot of psychiatric diagnoses, it's kind of you have to figure out which box a person fits in, because not everybody's going to have the same symptoms. And you kind of hear about that all the time. It's like we have this list of things to kind of check off. If you check off most of these boxes, then you are this, or so it is a little hard to describe. But for me, I was depressed most of the time. So I would just be in the darkest, like I say now, but everything was just gray and dreary. There was nothing that I could find joy in. I could look and see that I have young children who are playful and fun and want to do things, but just not find joy in any of it. So a lot of just going through the motions because I had to, but not really ever feeling joyful about anything. Always just this nagging feeling in the back of my mind that I have no worth. Despite the fact that I'm raising kids, like I have no worth. There's nothing that's of value that I can bring forth. So why am I even here? But then to try to like be on the opposite side of that, you get like extra energy. So that's where like this feeling of I have to go, I have to go, I have to go do something, I have to be out of here, I have to go, or and I also later was through the process diagnosed with obsessive compulsive disorder. So that was where I wanted to have order in things, like everything needed a place, everything had to be this way, and this is how we do this, and this is how, and like to the point like in some organizations that I belong to, I'm like writing lists to people in emails and saying, this is how it needs to be done, and not understanding why people don't want to do it that way. Like I've made perfect sense. You need to do what I'm saying to do. So there's a lot of just tension all the time. So the most of it for me was I was severely depressed. And I could never really act on the other side of it, where I just I had all this extra energy and I wanted to go do something because of my responsibility. Somewhere in my mind, I never lost sight of the fact that I had to do the minimums. I wasn't great at them, but I had to do the minimums. So I didn't allow that. I never went into like a psychosis or anything like that. Like something kept me grounded, and I think it's just the word responsibility that kept me grounded in that.
So on a day-to-day basis, what do you think it was like for your family around you? So for obviously your children and your husband.
um, I couldn't have been pleasant to be around. My children were scared of me. It's taken a lot of work to rebuild our relationships. My son and I are close, but I still think that he doesn't like trust me, even though he's seen everything that's happened and he knows. But I still think that he struggles with telling me what's going on with him. I worry about him. He's the one that took probably the brunt of everything that I ever did. I think he wore that on his shoulders throughout his entire childhood. So I worry about him falling under the same things as he grows older, and perhaps he knows and hasn't mentioned it. And so I just try to be supportive of him and where he is. My husband and we fought all the time. Um, I think both of us wanted to leave each other more than one time throughout the course of our relationship. But I didn't work. And, it's almost like just the fact that we had it was more expensive to be separated than it was to be together. So like really, again, just going through the motions of a marriage when both of us were unhappy because I was unhappy. Like he wasn't ill. He didn't know, especially when before the diagnosis, he didn't know how bad things were for me. So, he's just going on this wild ride and having no understanding of where it's coming from. So yeah, it's amazing that we're all still together as a family, to be honest.
Yeah, that's powerful. I mean, having the family support.
Yes, I'm very fortunate. I really am. I think any one of them could have given up on me at any time, and totally justifiable, but they didn't. So yeah, I'm very fortunate in that way.
And yet you're here, you're sharing your story, you're appearing on podcasts, you're advocating for healing. And there is healing. There is healing outside the medications, which are usually prescribed. So how did that healing come to you?
It's actually
mention Vinnie Tortorich now, right? I think
yeah, sure. We could definitely mention him. So, as you mentioned in the introduction, is that I am a follower of Vinnie Tortorich, and he coined NSNG, which stands for no sugars, no grains. I started eating in that manner, and no sugars, no grains is basically a ketogenic diet. What we do is we cut out all processed carbohydrates. We really limit anything that has sugar. So that means that fruit is, we don't really eat a lot of fruit. So it's basically keto. He coined NSNG because when he wrote his book, Fitness Confidential, he didn't use the word keto or ketogenic in that book because he knew he'd get some pushback from it at the time. So he's like, well, fine, I'll coin NSNG. And it's essentially a keto diet. So I don't want anybody to be confused by that, but I owe everything that I've done to the fact that I followed him and the information he provides. So I always like to throw that out there and give him credit. But what I turned 40, and my general practitioner was like, we need to do your 40-year-old blood work. So we do the blood work, and the blood work comes back, and he's displeased with what my cholesterol numbers are doing. And my trigs were probably sky high because I was eating a standard American diet at the time. So, and I was on medication. I was being treated for my bipolar disorder. So I was on antipsychotics and antidepressants. So he suggests that I need to take a statin. I wasn't really following Vinnie at that time, but my husband was, and he was talking to me over while he was listening to podcasts. Again, he travels, so he gets to listen to podcasts in the car. I'm home with the kids. I don't get to listen to a lot of podcasts at that time. So he would come home and just like tell me things. And he had said he had heard, them talking about statins, and, maybe they weren't all that they were cracked up to be or whatever. So I had the very small amount of information when that conversation happened with my doctor, and I just threw it out there, and I was like, instead of going on a statin, can I please have 6 months to change my diet and see how that works? And he said yes, which is honestly amazing, because what doctor's going to say, this is back in 2017. No doctor is thinking about that. They just want to write the prescription and send you on your way. So he did say yes, and that's what I did. I started NSNG actually the day my doctor's appointment was 2 weeks before my birthday. I started officially the day after my birthday, and it was not easy. I was a huge ice cream eater, so I had to learn how to eat high fat yogurt with berries to replace my ice cream habit. And I was always proficient in the kitchen. I just was always exhausted and tired all the time, so I would always lean on just like quick foods or frozen foods, heating stuff up that came in a box or whatever. So that's how, on the weekends we might cook together, but during the week it was always something packaged and quick. So I had to then really rearrange my life in that, we would take the time to write out a menu, and then write out the list of ingredients we needed, go to the store, buy a week's worth of ingredients, and then, chisel out the time in the day to make the meals. So that, that was a different aspect of life that you have to start right away, because you're not gonna eat a healthy meal if you're just going to the store and picking something up off the shelf. And this is like before keto products. I think it's harder now because there's these tempting keto products. I didn't have that, so luckily I skipped that. And I also never felt that it was important to try to recreate something. So I never made like a cloud bread or anything like that. Like I never made a substitution. It was just, if I'm going to eliminate it, it's gone. I don't need to try to tempt myself with some strange version of the same thing. So I never did that. But it was really very basic. It is no sugars, no grains. So it sounds like it's complicated, but it's not. It's very simple. If it has sugar in it or if it has grains in it, you don't eat it. And then, of course, we learn later the seed oils are bad as well. So cutting out the seed oils as well. And that's what I did. So for 6 months, I ate NSNG, and I went back to the doctor, and he ordered the blood work, and he looks at it and he says, all of the numbers I was looking at, they're all going back within range. Keep doing what you're doing. So I did. I'd also lost like 30-40 pounds in that 6 months. I mean, it it was visible that something was different. And so, and then we had things like our church would have a supper on Wednesday nights, and it was never something I could eat. So on Wednesdays, I just said, oh, I'll just try. I just won't eat on Wednesdays. So I would just like one day a week have a fasting day. It worked for me then. I don't really do any extended fasting now, but it worked for me then. I had a lot of extra weight to lose, and I could live, I had trained my body to live off of itself. And so, that was working. And so I actually went into this low carb lifestyle having no idea that it could do anything for my mental health whatsoever. I was listening to podcasts, and it started just becoming part of the conversation. I mean, people talking about the brain fog clearing or their depression going away. Then you start hearing about people like Dr. Georgia Ede or Dr. Chris Palmer, and they're talking about getting people off of their medications. And here I am, basically 50 pounds lighter, still taking the exact same dose of the medications that I was taking for a year after starting the low carb diet. And we had moved again. So we lived in South Carolina, we moved to Texas. So that's halfway across the country. My husband moved, I think 4 or 5 months before me and the children did. I was in charge of everything the kids needed to go do. I was in charge of keeping the house straight and in order so that we could show it and try to sell it. Was in charge of traveling to go see our East Coast family before we drove to Texas. Just all of these things, all of the goodbyes at school, all of the summer camps that were the last time we were doing that. Like I was the emotional support for my kids because my husband was already gone, because I was hearing it in the podcast. It's like, maybe, just maybe, it's working for me, and I haven't taken the time to really realize it. Um, so I just felt compelled, like I have to try, even if it doesn't work, even if everybody comes up to me and says, Robyn, there's a problem, you're not acting right, I think you need to go back on the meds. At least I would know, because I wouldn't know if I didn't try. So that's what made me start to decide to get off the medications that I was on and really just see if it was possible for me to live a life without those meds.
So you adopted a low carb diet basically to improve your cholesterol levels, which,
Yes.
which worked. But the bonus was that mental health disorder improved and you started feeling better. So did you ever go to your psychiatrist, I guess you were seeing, to see if they could either titrate or take you off medications?
So when we lived in South Carolina, it was really a psychiatry desert.
Mm.
I would see a psychiatrist for a couple months, and then their office would shut down and I'd have to go find another one. They would take me off all the meds the first one put me on, and then put me on all the meds they wanted to put me on. So I never felt well, and it was constantly changing. So I'd be titrating off of medication and titrating on a new medication, just constantly until it got to the point where, my husband was having to take a day off of work because I was having to go so far to see someone, that I just transferred all my medications to my general practitioner, and he just kept refilling the last thing that I was on. So when it came time to try to get off the medications, I just went back to the new general practitioner that I had here in Texas, and I told them what was going on. I told them about my diet, and I told them I have this strong desire. I need to try, with the complete willingness to have to go back on these meds if I need them. And I think that was an important part of the conversation. Like, I'm not saying I want to go off and just be, uncontrolled. I just need to see for myself what's possible. And if it's not going to work, then we know it's not going to work. And I will come knocking on your door and ask for a referral somewhere else, to get back on the medications. So my general practitioner, again, just another general practitioner, was very agreeable and said, yeah, let's try it. So she helped me off the meds, and it was a long and slow process. It's not easy. Some of these, especially the antipsychotics, they really grab a hold of you. In fact, sometimes I'll get just like these weird things that happen, and I'm like, am I still like reliving some half-life of this medication that still needs to get out of my system, all these years later? But I had to do things like, as soon as I took the especially the antipsychotic, as soon as I took it, 15 30 to 30 minutes later, I was asleep. I was out. It's more of a sedative than anything else. So I was out. So I had to like learn how to sleep and put some sleep routines in place to make sure that I was sleeping. And just if I would go more than 2 days without it, as I was going off the meds, if I would go more than 2 days, like, because it would be like we got down to the lowest milligrams of the medication, and then we would try to do like every other day or every 2 days, or to wean off. But at some points that was too long, and it would just like grab me, and I just couldn't function. I would just sit around all day, like there was just nothing that I had that I could give. But it was still, that was just part of this process. I mean, it's not easy, and you got to take your time with it, and you have to work with a physician and to even do it. I would never ever in a million years suggest that somebody try to do that on their own, because some of the things that these medications can do as you're going off of them can actually make it feel like you're even worse than you were before you even started the medication. So yeah, it was hard process, but we did that. So I think I was finally finished all of my medications in 2019, and I haven't had to go back on any mental health medication since.
That's wonderful. So, Robyn, did you ever change your diet along the way? Did you like, I don't know, try carnivore maybe, or vegan, or low carb, or real high fat ketogenic? I mean, did you ever change, or did you just stick with Vinnie's NSNG? Well,
So
yeah.
yeah, I mean,
There are so many different versions of,
right, like I'm okay with all of them. They're all welcome in my world. Whatever's going to work for you, I'm pleased that you're doing it. As long as you're not eating all the processed stuff, I'm happy with it. But what I say now is that I'm mostly carnivore, always NSNG. I never really stray. So I did go completely full carnivore for a year, and it does feel very good, but it's limiting. And So I've introduced some things back, but I did find out like immediately there was things that irritated my stomach. So I mean, within the first 6 months, I knew I couldn't eat lettuce. So salad was out. So all these people were like, yeah, I just eat salad all the time. I'm like, oh, that would kill me. And it upsets my stomach so bad. But you really start to get in tune with your own body as you go through this. So I did refine. I eat very few things that have carbs in it. I'm really trying to be way closer to carnivore, but every once in a while I make my own uh, marinara sauce. So I will put that, but it's like 3 pounds of meat to a cup of sauce. Like it's real light. I don't do it very often. Sometimes if we'll go to a steakhouse, I'll get a small sweet potato with it, but I have to be real mindful of that because I know that if I eat too many carbs, that my symptoms come back. So I really do. I don't measure my food. I've never tested for a ketone. I don't test. I just know that if I eat too many carbs, especially too many days in a row, that I'm going to have symptoms, and those are symptoms that I don't want to have. So I basically have cut all of that out.
Okay, so there's another side to this story I really want to explore because I think you discussed it on another podcast. So somewhere along the line of your keto journey, I would say you discovered that your LDL cholesterol was really high. What happened?
So that was the year that I was full carnivore. And at the time, my doctor was Dr. Tro. So, he tests everything. And let's see, I think it was 2021. Yeah, it was 2021. And, my cholesterol goes up, and he's really still quite new to, at the time, still quite new to practicing medicine in this way. Very, very smart, very, very, very intelligent. And his first response to me back in 2021 was, everything says that you need to be put on a statin. Everything that I'm looking at, you need to be put on a statin. And he goes and he looks at me and he's like, but you're going to refuse, aren't you? And I said, yes. I've already been through, like, the reason why I'm seeing Dr. Tro is because I've already had this conversation with 3 other doctors here locally, and they're all like, what are you doing here? Basically, we just parted ways. So I needed somebody who understood. So he said, you're going to say no, aren't you? And I said, yeah. And so he's like, well, then let's try to figure this out. If going super low carb is going to cause your cholesterol number to go up, then it stands to reason that adding carbohydrate back in should lower it, which is basically the Feldman protocol. And we were already talking about that. So I was on board. He said, let's try that. So he prescribed a sweet potato every day. So I had to eat one sweet. Oh, well, let me back up for a second. First, I did have my CAC score done, and it's 0. So we didn't have any elevated concern. And it's really hard to say, FH, familial hypercholesterolemia. Hopefully I said it right. It's a really hard one to say. Was tested for that and it was negative. So I don't have any genetic reason to be concerned. So these were some deciding factors that came into play when we decided to do this. So the treatment was to eat one sweet potato a day. I couldn't eat it. It had to be my first food, and I couldn't eat it with any fat. So, like, obviously you wouldn't put a bunch of butter on a sweet potato, but I couldn't do that. I just had a cooked sweet potato. Now, I absolutely love sweet potato. So I was totally on board with eating one sweet potato a day, but I can tell you within a week, I was craving stuff. So I go from basically full carnivore to eating one sweet potato a day to, like, I'm craving stuff. Like I can't fill this empty void in my body. So I know right away that something's up with the sweet potato, but I'm trying this experiment. So 3 months later, I go in, and then all of the numbers are miraculously improving just from this one sweet potato. However, part of the part of my requirements for getting off of the medication years earlier was that I asked my family to let me know if they saw any symptoms coming back, because I assumed that they would notice it before I did. So I was already getting feedback from my family, something's not right with you, we're getting a little concerned. And I was like, well, I'm just doing this experiment, let's just see how it goes. So, but I did tell Dr. Tro that this was going on. Seems like some of my depressive symptoms are coming back. And so like any other good doctor, he said, we need to adjust the dose to the person.
Of the
Which is, yeah, but it's a sweet potato. It's still a sweet potato, but it's medicine. Food is medicine. So this sweet potato is my prescription for lowering my bad cholesterol. Then that's what we did. So we moved to a half a sweet potato. So I was eating a half a sweet potato every day. And that's when I really started noticing that these problems were happening. My real big trigger for when my depression is returning is that the first thing I think when I wake up is I can't wait to go back to bed. So I was having those thoughts, and I was going, okay, yeah, there's definitely something going on. 2 months in, we talk again, we reduce it to a quarter of a sweet potato. And these thoughts just aren't going away. I was at the time before doing this, I worked out every day, I went for long walks, I used my rower, I practiced daily yoga. All of those things had stopped. I was not doing the things I loved anymore. I was really just going waking up, going through the motions, going back to bed. So I knew things weren't well. And eventually it was just like, I'm not going to do this anymore. Obviously the sweet potato is messing with my head. I need to stop. And so that's what we did. And I was one of, I think, 5 that's in a case study that Tro was one of the authors on, and Dave Feldman, actually. So we found out that this works. But what was also learned is that it can't just work for everyone, because there are a lot of other things that are happening with people who have cholesterol issues. That's not necessarily their only issue. So for me, it was my mental health. And as soon as I added the carbs back in, it came back. And even after I stopped taking the medication, it was months before I was able to feel well again. I really needed to. I was off of my medical sweet potato, going back to NSNG, going back to carnivore, and literally writing down, you have to walk today, you have to work out today, you have to ride your rower, you have to do your yoga. Like forcing myself through the motions to recreate the habit. And like finally, like after 3 months, it finally just kind of lifted. I didn't go back on medications. My family, everybody knew in the house what was going on, and we made that work. But it took a long time to kind of crawl back out after that.
I remember the beginnings of all of that conversation, and when Dave was actually recruiting for his study. So I interviewed Dave then, and I remember then Dr. Tro published his case study. I don't know if you were one of his patients, but the study obviously showed that when people introduced one sweet potato into their diet, 3 months later, their LDL was lower. And I can attest to that. I can manipulate my LDL very quickly with a few carrots here and there in my diet. That's all it takes.
Yeah, it really doesn't take much. So yeah, if I have to do any blood work for any like insurance purposes, that's what I'm going to have to do, because I'm not willing to take the statin, and eating that kind of carbohydrate carbohydrate on a daily basis is just not going to work for me. So that's exactly what I'll have to do if I ever have to do that. But we know I started seeing a doctor that's closer to home who understands my lifestyle, and that was the first thing we discussed. I was like, look, this is my blood work. He's like, do you know who Dave Feldman is? It's like, yeah, I follow him. He goes, so you're not concerned? I said, no. He goes, good, I'm not concerned either. And that was that. But that's a choice that I made. I love that he was on board with it. I didn't have to have that conversation. And again, it's not a choice that may work for everyone. It's my choice. And at the time, it was really no man's land. In fact, that's how Tro presented it to me. He said, we are in no man's land right now. We are finding out things together. And I was like, yeah, let's do it. Let's try it. Let's see what happens. And so I know for me, that's the right decision. I've lived the life of someone who suffers from bipolar and has these horrible symptoms. I don't need that again. And right now, the way I look at it is it's a number on a piece of paper. And if you're following anybody else who is in our low carb space that's talking about cholesterol and statins and all of that stuff, it's like, it doesn't make sense to do that either. Because even taking a statin could cause the same problems as well. I mean, that's a side effect. I don't really like saying side effect because I think it is an effect. It's not a side effect. This drug causes that. So so that is an effect of the drug. So it's not something that I'm willing to do. And I just trust that eventually the science is going to back up my decision. And I think that it is. And we're going to find out more as more of these studies come out. And they're coming out frequently.
I was about to say they're coming out and we're learning so much more. I think 3-4 years have passed now and we've learned so much more now. But you've been lucky, I think, all along. You've had doctors or GPs or whatever. I think mainly GPs who've just worked with you rather than against.
Yeah, the stars just all aligned at the right place, the right time for all of this to transpire. Because yeah, I mean, who finds just a hospital doctor that's going to be like, sure, you can change your diet, I'll wait. Like most of them are just ready to just go and here's your medicine and enjoy your lifetime of medication. And I was fortunate enough to find two when I needed them. One to allow me to try both things, one to allow me to try to change my diet, one to allow me to try to go without the medications. But that's not to say I haven't had my run-ins. Like I said, when my cholesterol numbers started going up, I went through several doctors trying to get them to understand, and there just wasn't enough information out there to back what I was saying, and they didn't want to hear it. And there's a lot of well-educated people who are educated with information that's old, that's been clarified. So that's not to say that they don't know what they're talking about. It just means that they haven't increased their knowledge or updated their knowledge. So, and we had some difficulties in those times, and that's what led me to go see Tro, and that worked out. That ended up being, quite a blessing.
Robyn, how does your family view you now, the new you?
Well, you said you had heard me on Casey's Boundless Body Radio podcast. He actually interviewed my husband, and in fact, this past year, he called it one of his favorite interviews. So if you want to hear that, my husband's name is Matt Dobbins. So you could always look for him on that. Our family is just so much better now that, like, when Matt and I travel together, it's like we're on a honeymoon again. Like the honeymoon that even though we did go on a honeymoon, I was sick at the time. He just didn't know it. I didn't tell anybody. So the joy that I should have been feeling, I guess, just was always just masked by just dread. But now everything's joyful. Like, I'll stop everybody. Like, we got to stop. The sun is setting. We got to go. I got to watch it. Once it goes down all the way and the colors finish in the clouds, we can go back to whatever it is we're doing. And we have, like, game nights, or we go and we do stuff together. And these were just things that weren't available when I was ill. When I was angry all the time, nobody wanted to be around me. When I was medicated, I was very much sedated, so I just couldn't participate in things. And then all of a sudden it's like all the lights are on and I'm awake, and uh, let's be a family together. So it's a really powerful thing that my husband stayed by my side that whole time, because it hurt. He talks about it now, and it hurts to watch the person you love go through the things that I was going through. But um so now that's changed into like just being proud and encouraging and all of that kind of stuff. So it's really good. And actually, to go back to the fact that we were talking about Dave and Dr. Tro, my family is featured in the Cholesterol Code documentary that is coming out. So
I'll wait for that to come out.
yeah, so yeah, we're going to the premiere. We're all excited about it. That's about in a few weeks. And so it's, they want to share their views from their side. They want to help people. My son was in college at the time, so he's not in it, but my daughter's in it. And she really is passionate about mental health, and she wants people to know that there's another way. So she's 17 now, but she talks to people about it. And she was like, if there's a support group and they needed somebody to talk, I would be there. So it's really cool to see how everybody's just embraced what went on with me. And it's changed their perspective on things as well.
That's wonderful. I'm looking out for that documentary. Robyn, I can spot something behind you.
Oh,
You want
what
to
is
show
it?
it to everyone? And is that not your award?
This is the award.
Yes.
It's hard to see when it's not on the light. Let's see. Hold it up.
Hold it up. That's, I think, as good as it gets.
Yeah.
On
That's
the
why
Zoom
it's on
call.
the light back
However,
here.
I think with the dark background, it shows better. Yes. So, okay. So tell us about that award.
So I'm one of the 10 recipients of the Metabolic Mind Fresh Start Award. So that's the actual physical award, but it did come with a grant. The purpose of which is to give people who lost some of their lives to mental illness a fresh start. And it's incredible. It's hard to believe that I was one of the recipients, but I'm just very grateful.
Can you tell us about Metabolic Mind?
Sure. This is it's founded by the Bazooki Group. So it's really, right now, it is the go-to place for information about metabolic health and psychiatry. So this website, I've told them many times that it's overwhelming. The amount of information that's on there is overwhelming. But if there's something you have a question about that has anything to do with mental health and how a ketogenic diet can support mental health strategies, mental health care, the information is there. So there's interviews, the studies are there. It has organized a lot of the practitioners throughout the world. So if you want to work with somebody who specializes this, their name's going to be on the website. It is just full of information and growing by the day. They put out so much content because this field is just booming. Metabolic psychiatry is just booming right now. It's like everybody's doing studies, everybody's doing and we finally are putting it all basically in one place where it's accessible to anyone. So Metabolic Mind is the place to go.
Brilliant. I'll put their website in the bottom. So, I mean, they give you a physical award, which obviously is something to be proud of, but the grant itself, and it's not just a few $100. I was about to say pounds, I'm used to the pounds. But it's a significant amount of money. Can you tell us more about it, Robyn, and what you're planning to do with it?
Sure. So the grant is $10,000. I'm not sure the conversion on that, so you have to do the math. But it's a significant amount of money, and part of the application process was one thing is that you needed to already be open and sharing your journey. So having been on a couple of other podcasts and the upcoming film and that stuff that certainly helped. But it was also, you had to show that you were what you were going to do with the money should you win it. And I've just started. I started last year. Actually, a friend of mine had just asked me to coach her, and so I did. And then while we were doing that, she's like, "You really need to do this. You're good at this. You've helped me so much." So I did. Again, the stars all aligned. I never asked her for payment, but she was so thankful for the help that she just sent me some money one day, and it was exactly the amount I needed to start my business. So I just turned it right over. And so I now have a business called Harbinger of Health, and it's a coaching business. So I was already working on forming that when I was applying for the award. So of course, I told them about that. So everything that I've done with the I have not spent all that money. But like you said in the introduction, I'm working on getting my full SMHP accreditation. So I've already taken the basic classes. I won the award. I immediately signed up for Dr. Georgia Eads classes. I've finished those, and I've purchased but haven't started yet all of the rest of the classes that I need for the accreditation. And then also simultaneously putting some funds towards some of the things that I needed to really make my business more efficient, and working on, I had a very basic website, so I've worked on making a better website. And like, it's been basically, the award was in October. It's now nearing the end of January, and I have been basically full out sprinting every single day since that happened to just, I'm just so thankful to no longer have to take away from my family to try to pursue something that I want to do. That's really making a big difference.
That's beautiful. So with that positive statement, we're going to end this interview. I hope to bring you back sometime in the future, Robyn, and I certainly will contact your husband as well, because I heard him on one podcast. And,
oh, good. Yeah, I mean, like I said, he gets to tell. You don't often get to hear like the other side of the story. We get so excited about what's going on here. Like, I'm having all of these very noticeable changes, but I became a completely different person. I guess I could have come out the other side and he didn't like who I was. I don't know. Like, it could have gone any direction, but it turned out for the best. So.
That's beautiful. So all of Robyn's details will be below. And please also subscribe to Robyn's YouTube channel. It's relatively new, but it's making a big impact already. So with everyone's support, hopefully we can grow the channel.
Yes, thanks.
As it deserves to grow. So Robyn, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. I appreciate you inviting me.
Bye for now.